before we go into more detail this afternoon's Farbrengen, I want to go over a few very brief things which the Rebbe spoke on Thursday night in the Farbrengen of Shel Pesach. The main topic which went through all sichas in the Farbrengen of Shel Pesach was about Mashiach in general, and more specific, that the Seudah which we eat at the end of the day of Shel Pesach, which is actually the Farbrengen of Shel Pesach, is referred to as Mashiach Seudah. This custom of eating Mashiach Seudah for the third Seudah of Shel Pesach originated by the Rebbe Rashab, by the Rebbe Nishmaseiden. Together with Kosas. And the Rebbe Rashab introduced this idea and also said that it goes back from the Baal Shem Tov. That the Baal Shem Tov used to have this custom of eating a third Suda on Shel Pesach and referred to this Suda as the Suda of Mashiach. And the Rebbe elaborated, he says, though for many generations this was something which was unknown, and even though the Baal Shem Tov had this custom, still it was unknown till the generation of the Rebbe Rashab, the generation of the Frierdiker Rebbe's father. And now, not only it is something which is kept secret, but on the contrary, it is spread to more and more Jews, to introduce more and more Yidden to take part in this Seudah. And the Rebbe compared it to the revelation of Hasidus in general. There was a time when this was something which was only for individuals. Then the Arizal writes that nowadays is mitzvah legalis, now it's already a time when it's a mitzvah to reveal this part of Torah. And nowadays, in our generation, not only is it a mitzvah legalis, is it a mitzvah to reveal it, but we are told how important it is, the whole idea of Yefutzu Meinasecha Chutza, to spread Chasidus, and see to it that every Yid has a shaychus to Chasidus, and Chasidus reaches to the furthest point of Chutza, an area which is defined as Chutza, as a totally outside area, and that is where it is our goal to reach with Chasidus to such an area. The Rebbe was talking all about Mashiach, how when Mashiach will come, he will teach Torah to all the Yidden. And even the Avos, how great and outstanding they are, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, will also be learning Torah from Mashiach. The Rebbe explained that the Torah that Mashiach will teach us is, as explained in Chassidus, it's a higher level of Torah. It's a level of Re'iyah, a vision. Not like we learn today, where one talks and we hear what he says. This will be a completely different level of learning, a learning of re'iyah, a learning of a vision, which is a much higher madrega of learning Torah, and that is why how great the others are in their own learning, and all other gedolim of previous generations, how great they are in their own learning, still they have not reached to this level of learning, which will be one which will be revealed by Mashiach. The Rebbe pointed out, we say an extra tefillah on Yontif, and it is said before we open the Aron Kodesh. Actually, when the Aron Kodesh is open, before Kriyas HaTorah, we say Hashem, Hashem, and we begin with the Rabbeinu Shalom. In this Rabbeinu Shalom, we say, V'yiskayim banu, and shall be fulfilled within us, Mikra Shekasav, the pasuk that says, V'nocha alav ruach Hashem, and the spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu shall rest upon him, Ruach Chochma Ubina, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, Ruach Eitza Gvura, Ruach Das V'yiras Hashem. This pasuk is a pasuk which defines Mashiach. The Rebbe says, it's very strange. We say in davening, a tefillah which we're asking for ourselves. V'yiskayim banu, it should be fulfilled upon us. What pasuk? A pasuk that describes Mashiach, v'nocha alav, ruach Hashem, alav, on him. Isn't it contradictory? On one hand, we are saying, v'yiskayim banu, may it be fulfilled within us. What should be fulfilled within us? The pasuk that describes all the great inyanim which are going to be on Mashiach. And for this reason, the Rebbe says, there's the Munkacha, the Minchas Alaza. There's a great Hungarian Rebbe, and a Paisik, says that we should omit this from our davening, because it's very contradictory. The Rebbe says, but however, the Alter Rebbe, who prepared the Nusach HaTfilah for us, did put it into our Tfilah. Is a siman that we are saying it, we should say it, and we are to say it every Yontif. So what is the pshat? So the Rebbe is learning. So the Rebbe teaches us in Tanya that every Yid possesses within himself a nitzutz, a spark of the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu. Well, the Rebbe explains it at length in Tanya. The Rebbe goes further. Not only does every Yid possess within himself a spark of the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, but every Yid possesses within himself a spark of the neshama of Mashiach as well. The Rebbe explained that in one Gemara, there's a Gemara that says that every Yid is compared to a koichav, to a star. Then we have a pasuk, Dorach koichav mi, a pasuk in Chumash Bamidbar, I think it's in Pashas Balak, Dorach koichav mi Yaakov, v'kom shevet mi Yisrael. And that pasuk is interpreted that the pasuk there is referring to Mashiach. So we see that the pasuk refers to Mashiach also as koichav. And here we have a pasuk where every Yid is referred to as a koichav, as a star. So, if I remember correctly, the Rebbe quotes it many times on behalf of Reb Nachum of Chernobyl. That therefore, based on this, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl says that there is a nitzus, there is a spark of Mashiach within every Yid. Memela, the Rebbe says, what we are davening here is we are begging from HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'yiskayim banu, fulfill within us Mikra Shekosov, the pasuk that says v'nocha olav whom? HaMashiach. Pasuk says that on Mashiach it will rest a spirit of wisdom and a spirit of understanding. All these things are going to rest on Mashiach, true. But being that we have a spark of Mashiach within us, within our neshamas, that is why this wish also has a shaychus to us. And here the Rebbe continues, we see it many times in our lives. We come across in Yonim where all of a sudden we were very, very successful in a certain inyan, in a Gashmistic inyan or in a Ruchnistic inyan, and we wonder to ourselves, where does this success come from? And this is the answer. It comes from us having the neshama, in our neshama, a nitzutz, a spark of the neshama of Mashiach. And this, the Rebbe says, at times brings out total unexpected success in many areas. The Rebbe compared it, we find, Chassidus explains that at times we see individuals get a hirur tshuva, get a thought of tshuva and a desire to do tshuva all of a sudden without any type of preparation. And the question arises, where does all this stem from? Where does it come from? Why all of a sudden? And Chassidus explains that this is the response to what the Mishnah says, that daily there is a baskel, there's a sound going out of heaven daily, calling for children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do tshuva. This act of tshuva, which people respond to, and sometimes we view it as a total surprise. Why? Where does this come from? Where did it originate from? This is a response to this baskol min hashamayim, to the echo min hashamayim, which calls for Yidden to do tshuva. The same the Rebbe says is this spark of Mashiach, which we have within us at certain times within our lives. This brings about an extra amount of hatzlach, of success, something which we haven't even expected, and we don't even have a irrational understanding. Where does it all come from? And the truth is, where does the taka come from? It comes from having a spark of Mashiach within us. In the Farbrengen of Achashel Pesach, the Rebbe also alerted that being that we are already getting ready for before the summer, and summer is a vacation time, so it's our obligation to see to it that those children we can come in contact to, and those children we can reach out to see to it that they get a proper type of a vacation which is not only suitable for their body, but a vacation which is suitable for and desirable for the neshama as well. In today's Farbrengen, the Rebbe began the Farbrengen how this is the Shabbos after Pesach. But a Shabbos after Pesach, we could have many ways. Here we have the Shabbos, the closest way possible to Pesach. As the Rebbe referred to the latter days of the week, there's an expression in Gemara, Kamei Shabbata, the days that come before Shabbos. The days that come before Shabbos, from Wednesday on, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are considered special days. This is the part of the week which already has an open and obvious shaychus to Shabbos. To such an extent, the Rebbe continues, that in halacha, there are many halachas which we are to take in consideration on Wednesday, that it is already before Shabbos. Just to cite one of them, the Rebbe mentioned that there is halachas in Shulchan Aruch about one going on a boat, that from Wednesday on, one is not allowed to leave on a long journey on a boat. Which again shows us how in halacha, from Wednesday on, we are tied to Shabbos. Regarding Thursday, we find even further details. There's a takana of Ezra HaSefer, who has instituted that people should take care of their wash, of their laundry on Thursday, so to see to it that we have clean clothes for Shabbos. So it again shows that when we're talking about Erev Shabbos, it doesn't necessarily mean Friday only. There's the famous expression of Misha Torach be'erev Shabbos Yochel b'Shabbos, one who has prepared on Friday has what to eat on Shabbos. This shows us that we're not talking particularly about Friday. We are talking about a few days before Friday, and to be more specific, it's from Wednesday on. The days are called Kamei Shabbato, the days of before Shabbos. Memela, when we are talking this Shabbos is extremely close to Pesach, to Acharei Shel Pesach, and Acharei Shel Pesach was on Thursday. And the Rebbe right away explained, we cannot have an Acharei Shel Pesach on a Wednesday or on a Friday. Because if Acharei Shel Pesach, the last day of Pesach, would fall out on a Wednesday, that means that the first day of Pesach is also on Wednesday. We have a klal, there's a rule, Loi Bidu Pesach, that Pesach cannot fall out neither on Monday, neither on Wednesday, neither on Friday, the first day of Pesach. So Mamela, as the Kviyas is this year, that Acharei Shel Pesach was on Thursday, this is the closest way possible of having a Kviyas, how the Shabbos, which comes after Pesach, should be close to Pesach. The Shabbos is close to Pesach. And Acharei Shel Pesach means it's the last day of Pesach, it's the conclusion of the entire Yontif. We all know, the Rebbe continues, the famous vote that from the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe did not insert into the Siddur, into the text of the Haggadah, Chasal Siddur Pesach, the Seder of Pesach is over, because Pesach spiritually is never over. In other words, we take the lesson from Pesach with us and live with it for the entire year. So when we're talking about Acharei Shel Pesach, it means actually the accumulation of the entire Yontif. And now we are going from this Yontif into Shabbos. Rebbe says, the Shabbos, which follows Pesach today, the day Sedre is also called Acharei, corresponding to the idea of Acharei Shel Pesach. So this shows us a very obvious shayches between Acharei Shel Pesach and the Sedre which was read today. And the Rebbe explained at length that though we have a shayches every day of the week to the Sedre, and every day of the week we learn in the Shiurim of Chitas a portion of the Sedre. However, when it comes Shabbos, this is when we go through the entire Sedre, from the beginning to the end, and not just do we review the Sedre. We go through the Sedre with calling people to the Torah, and each one of them making a bracha, mentioning Hashem's name, a bracha b'shem u'malchus, at the beginning of his aliyah and at the end of his aliyah. And we know what Chassidus teaches, what bracha means. Bracha stems from, not only is it a blessing and a praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is also an union of a hamshacha, revealing godliness amongst us. So come Shabbos, we go through this entire Sedre in a bracha v'hamshacha with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Mamela, the Rebbe says, this shows us how this week and this Shabbos and this Sedre is extremely tied in together with the Yontif of Pesach. I don't know if it was here or elsewhere, but somewhere here in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe also explained the greatness of the day of Achin Shel Pesach, that Achin Shel Pesach we eat shruya, we eat gebrokts. All Pesach we do not eat gebrokts. Not only we don't eat it, it is prohibited to be eaten by Chassidim. And Achin Shel Pesach, Rabbi mentioned it in the Farbrengen of Achin Shel Pesach as well, it was seen the attitude of the Rabbeim that they went out of their way and made sure that they ate gebrokts. To such an extent that they would put pieces of matzah into their fish and into their soup. A type of eating, the Rebbe says, which normally all year round one doesn't even eat that way. And here they went out of their way to eat gebrokts. It's explained that this is a higher day. Achin Shel Pesach is higher than the entire Yontef of Pesach. And that is why, an accomplishment spiritually in Pesach, we cannot be mevarer the inyan of eating gebrokts. Comes Achin Shel Pesach, it's a yet higher madrege, and that is why we can be mevarer another area which we couldn't do on Pesach, and that is the inyan of gebrokts. The Rebbe went a step further today and also said that is why when it comes Shavuos, the korbanos which were brought in the Beis Hamikdash Shavuos was the Shtei Alechem, and the Shtei Alechem was complete chametz. This means that Shavuos we go a step further and we are able to purify not only matzah and not only shruya, but even something which is mamish chametz. Getting back to our inyan, on this Shabbos, where we have the elevation of the entire Yontef of Pesach, actually, it is an appropriate time, the Rebbe says, to discuss inyanim which have a shaykhs to Achin Shel Pesach, and inyanim which were discussed in the Farbrengen of Achin Shel Pesach. In the Farbrengen of Achin Shel Pesach, the Rebbe discussed an inyan in that day's Rambam, in the Rambam of Hilchas Chametz U'Matzah, where the Rambam brings a halacha about taking a piece of matzah and dipping it into charoises. This is what the Rambam says, that in those days, umetabel b'charoises, he would take the piece of matzah and dip it into charoises. We nowadays don't feel like this way. We don't dip the matzah into charoises unless when it comes to koirich, then we have the morer and charoises and matzah. Then we have another halach in the Rambam. Rambam starts off bizman hazeh nowadays. She'ein, there is no Pesach, there is no korban. He eats matzah, dips the matzah into the charoises and he eats it. On this halacha, listen carefully, where the Rambam repeats the inyan of dipping matzah into charoises, the Raavad comments ze hevel. You know, the Raavad always uses a very sharp language on the Rambam. He claims it's ridiculous to say that the matzah is dipped into charoises. But if the Raavad argues the Rambam, that the Rambam claims that the matzah should be dipped in charoises, and the Raavad claims that we do not have to dip it in the charoises, why does the Raavad wait with his comment to the second time that the Rambam mentions it? He should have argued the first time when the Rambam says umetabel b'charoises, that he dips it into charoises if he eats the matzah by itself or the morer in itself, he dips it into charoises. That is when the Raavad should have came with his argument, and not wait for the second time when the Rambam repeats that matzah is to be dipped into charoises. Then he comes up with this idea that zeh hevel, it's ridiculous. Talking about the matzah and the charoises, the Rebbe described how the Frierdiker Rebbe used to dip his morer into charoises. Charoises is made from nuts and wine, nuts, apples, and pears. Wait a minute. But it also needs wine, like you say. So the Rebbe says, how did the Frierdiker Rebbe get the wine into his charoises? When it came to charoises, in other words, when it came to it was the middle of the Seder, when it came to morer and he needed the charoises, there's the little plate what the becher of wine stands on. And there's always an overflow of wine. So rather than pouring wine into the charoises, what he did was he took the charoises and dipped it into the wine which was on his tetzele, around the becher. That's what the Rebbe tells.
Into the wine.
The chaysis
instead of pouring it into the.
Instead of?
Instead of pouring wine into the.
Seems like that.
We'd be okay also?
But anyways, this he just mentioned while he was describing and talking about the Indian of Charoises. Question comes back to the Ravid. Why does the Ravid wait for the Rambam when he repeats himself that matzah is dipped in Charoises, and that is when he brings out his argument? Briefly, what the Rebbe explained, the second halacha is where the Rambam is talking Bisman Hazeh. What do we right away see from this? That we see that Bisman Habayis, when there was Korban Pesach also eaten in the Seder, that is when the Ravid obviously agrees to the fact that then it was dipped into Charoises. It's just when the Rambam starts to explain how we feel, how we do Bisman Hazeh, that is when the Ravid argues. That's how it seems from the sequence of halachas. Why is this so? So the Rebbe is explaining. He says it's based on a Ragachover. The Ragachover discusses this inyan and explains it similarly. Matzah has within itself two inyanim. In matzah there's an expression of freedom. However, at the same time, matzah is referred to as a lechem oini. It's a poverty food. It's a poor food. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, when we celebrated the Seder with the Korban Pesach, with everything, that is when we had two inyanim in matzah. Matzah was an inyan of Cherus, symbolized Cherus, freedom, our exodus of Mitzrayim. Matzah also symbolized the inyan of Lechem Oini. Moreh, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, was an obligation to eat min HaTorah. Today, Moreh is only midarabbanan. Why is this so? The Rebbe continues. Today we are in Golus. Now that we are in Golus, we have a concept of merirus, of bitterness, for the fact that we are in Golus. So Memele Moreh, we're already not obligated to eat min HaTorah. What does this mean? That all the inyanim in the Seder that deal with the concept of Moreh and merirus are not applicable min HaTorah today. This is how the Rebbe learns. Charoises is also something which is zecher letit. The Alter Rebbe explains in Shulchan Aruch, why do we eat charoises? This reminds us on the cement which the Yidden made in Mitzrayim. And therefore, the Rebbe says, now when we eat matzah today, we only eat the matzah because of the tzat cherus which is in matzah. All the inyonim, lechem oini, moreh, merirus, all this we are not obligated to do bisman hazeh because we are in Golus. So we already have merirus. We have spiritual bitterness. So that is why min HaTorah there is no chiyuv for moreh today. So that is why bisman habayis, the Ravid had nothing against taking the piece of matzah and dipping it into charoises, because matzah, as we just mentioned, is symbolic to two things. Matzah is symbolic to the lechem oini, and that is why it corresponded to be dipped into charoises. Unfortunately, now we have the idea of lechem oini and the idea of merirus. We have all this spiritually because we are in Golus. So that's why min HaTorah we're not mechuyev to do it in the Seder. We eat moreh, but it's only an obligation of the Rabbanan. It's not an obligation of min HaTorah. That is why when it comes to Bisman Hazeh, which is the second halacha in the Rambam, she'ein sham korban macha. That is why here the Rambam claims, if the Ravid claims, there is no dipping the matzah into the charoises, because the fact that we dip matzah into charoises and eat moreh, all this goes hand in hand according to the Ravid. All this we do to remind ourselves on the moreh which we had in Mitzrayim, and now we celebrate a thanks to the Eibishter. Being that unfortunately we are back into a situation of merirus, spiritual merirus, though It no way can be compared to what we had in Mitzrayim. And here the Rebbe quoted a very interesting Maral. The Maral says, the Maral Miprog, that once the Yidden were taken out of Mitzrayim, a Yid can never be a slave again. We are in Golus, true, but we are not slaves. Yitzias Mitzrayim created a new image. Yitzias Mitzrayim created a concept of Kili B'nei Yisrael Avodim. Who are we enslaved to? Only to the Rabbeinu Shalom. After Yitzias Mitzrayim, the Maral says, there's no more a thing that a Yid can be a slave. No more such a thing in existence. However, on the other hand, let us not forget there's still spiritual bitterness. We are in Golus. And being that we are in Golus, that is why we don't eat no Morim in our Torah anymore, and we don't, the matzah that we eat is not because of the matzah we eat is not because of the lechem oini, but because matzah is chayros. So in other words, all the inyanim that have to do with merirus, with bitterness, we are not obligated to do min ha-Torah while we are in Golus. And if so, the Ravid claims we shouldn't have to dip the matzah into charesis as well. The other reading which the Rebbe spoke about in today's Farbrengen is being that Shabbos elevates the entire week and has a shaykhs not only to the entire week back till Sunday, and as we say every day in davening, Hayom Yom Rishon b'Shabbos, Sheni b'Shabbos, and so forth. So the Ramban explains in Chumash what is the ground of reciting this daily. He says by saying every day Hayom so and so l'Shabbos, the Ramban says we fulfill the mitzvah of Zocher Asyom HaShabbos l'Katshon, that we should constantly remember Shabbos. How do we constantly remember Shabbos during the week? So if we say every day in davening, today is the first day from Shabbos, the second day from Shabbos, and so forth, this is a reminder to Shabbos. But it also, the Rebbe continues, has a shayches to last Shabbos. In other words, this Shabbos elevates the entire week, including last Shabbos. What is so special about last Shabbos? Last Shabbos we recited in the Haftarah about the Atzomas HaYeveshes, the Nevuah of Yecheskel, and the Atzomas HaYeveshes, which in essence the entire Haftarah deals with the concept of Trias HaMesim. Trias HaMesim is also something which we look forward to with the coming of Mashiach. On one hand, the Rambam tells us, Ein Bein, what is the difference between now and the coming of Mashiach? El Shibud Malchi Yispilvad. The fact that we will be released, we wouldn't be under the yoke of the Goyim anymore. This is phase 1 of Mashiach's coming. The second phase is a yet higher one, Trias HaMesim. And if we think for a minute about Trias HaMesim, this is the biggest inyan in the world that's going to happen outside the realms of nature. The fact that people who are Mesim are going to be Mechai, are going to become alive. This is something which is completely away from the rules of nature. So this is a yet higher step after the coming of Mashiach. What are we told now? We are told on this Shabbos that Achon Shel Pesach, we say the Haftarah which deals with Mashiach. Here we are told that on the Shabbos of Chalamoid Pesach, which is even before Achon Shel Pesach, we are told about Trias HaMesim, which is a yet higher madrege than the initial madreges which we are going to be reaching by the coming of Mashiach. Rabbi said this is something which all of us have to know about, adults as well as children. Rabbi said that we know that from the stories from the Frierdiker Rebbe, from the writings from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that there were those that claimed that children only have to be taught in yonim that can be rationalized according to Seichel. We educate children and we're going to tell them stories about miracles and moifsim and things which are totally outside the realm of Seichel. This is something which is not suitable for the education of children. So we know that the Frierdiker Rebbe told us that this is not so. On the contrary, from early childhood has to be trained and taught about inyanim that are l'mayla mederech hateva, that are outside the realm of nature, and moifsim, such type of inyanim. Memela, when we're talking about the inyanim of Tchiyas HaMeisim, it is definitely things which are not only for adults to believe in, but we have to train little kinderlach that they too should begin believing in that and being aware of that and so forth. The Rebbe concluded with a taich of the Magid. Magid teiches the Mishnah, Da mala mala mimoch. You should know what is on top of you. So the Magid teiches, Da mala maila. You should know that whatever happens on top is mimoch, comes as a result and as an outcome of your actions. The Rebbe says we are hoping and praying to be zeicher to all these great and outstanding revelations of the coming of Mashiach and what will be afterwards Tchiyas HaMeisim, but we have to know that it all depends on us. It all depends on our Meisim, on our acts and on our deeds, and when our acts and deeds will be accordingly, this will bring about from HaKadosh Baruch Hu a proper response in accordance to our action. Late in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe explained Rashi's in this week's Sedre. And interesting, he explained three different Rashis. He said the number of 3 is a very meaningful number. The Rebbe says number 3, first of all, we are constantly hoping for the third Beis HaMikdash. So it's very meaningful. And besides, number 3 has a lot of milas. Number 3 is symbolic to the entire concept of shalom, of peace. Because when two people are in an argument and there are two different opinions, it's the third opinion that straightens out these two. So therefore the number of 3, Shloisha, is very meaningful. And in fact, Rabbi always explains a Rambam in the Farbrengen. Today he explained 3 Rambams. And even in the Mishnah and Avos, which as of today we began reciting Pirkei Avos after Mincha, so the Rabbi also brought out 3 inyanim in Pirkei Avos, very briefly, but also 3. Besides all this, the Rebbe again went back to last week's Haftarah, which we just discussed. The Haftarah of Atzomeis Hayaveshos, the dried bones, which this is a Haftarah to Yecheskel Hanavi. I think I have it here. And the Rebbe explained an outstanding Hoyrah, a lesson which we are to derive from this Haftarah. Vayomer Elai, Pasuk says, Ben Adam. In these Sedurim it's 395. Vayomer Elai, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying to him, to whom? To Yecheskel. And referring to him, to the Navi Yecheskel, Ben Adam, son of man, are you going to bring life to these Atzomis? And then the pasuk goes on, Vayomer Elai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling him, Hinove, say prophecy Elai Atzomis Ha'ela, on these bones. Va'amarta Aleim ha'atzomis ha'yeveshes, tell them, ha'atzomis ha'yeveshes, they are dried bones. Shimu dvar Hashem, listen to the word of Hashem. The Rebbe says, listen to who he's talking to. He's talking to Atzomis, as that we see further from the pasuk. These are dried bones, without skin and flesh, without anything, just dried bones. And what is the Navi told? Ben Adam, if he's only considered worthy of the title Ben Adam, and we know Chassidus always stresses Adam is Adam El Elyon, similar to the above. If he's remembering his title, that he's similar to the above, what he's to do is go to the Atzomas HaYeveshes and talk to them the words of Hashem. The Rebbe said, use this expression, go out into New York and see those Yidden who are defined as Atzomas HaYeveshes. They haven't learned Aleph Beis. Not only the Aleph Beis, when at times we use an expression, Aleph Beis, meaning the beginning. They are lacking the beginning, the basics of Yiddishkeit. They don't even know what an Aleph is. They don't even know what a Beis is. In terms of the letters of Aleph Beis, they don't even know. And why don't they know, the Rebbe says? Very simple. Because they are Tinokish and Ishbu. They are children which were which were captured amongst Goyim and never had an opportunity to get a Jewish education, and their parents never gave them a Jewish education, and that's why they don't know all about it. But it is our obligation, if we look to take a direction from this Navi, to take a Hira from this Navi, even those who are yet in a position of atzomas hayaveshes, they are dried bones without any flesh, without any skin, without any life to them, without any spiritual life. And the Navi is telling us, go to these atzomas hayaveshes and see to it that they should be shimud dvar Hashem. And ultimately, when we fulfill this wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we will see that we will be successful, and they will not remain atzomas hayaveshes any longer, but they will get back their flesh and their skin, and not only that, but their life, to a total Indian of Tchiyas HaMesim, and we will see the peiros and the fruits of our work. But we should never sit back and say, it's not befitting for me, that person is so far from Yiddishkeit, he can be defined as atzomas hayaveshes, how are you sending me to have a shaychus to that Yid? This is the lesson we take from this Kriya, from this Haftarah, where the Navi was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, go and speak to the atzomas hayaveshes that shimu dvar Hashem, bring them the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Yes.
Now we will try to go to the Psukim in the Chumash. In Parshas Acharei, as it's customary recently that the Rebbe discusses in Yonim, which these questions were raised in the various periodicals and the various koifs and publications, where questions are raised in the weekly Sedre in the Rashi. First, the Rebbe discussed a Rashi in Pasuk Gimel at the beginning of the Sedre. Pasuk tells us, "Bezois yovei Aaron ala kodesh." This is how Aaron should enter the kodesh. So there's a Rashi, that Rashi tells us, Bezois, the total of Bezois in numeric value is 410. If you were to take the letters Beis, Zayin, Aleph, and Tov, we will get a total of 410. What shaychus does it have here to 410? This is the Remes for the first Beis HaMikdash. Very strange. Why? Rashi, we know, is limited to Pshutei Shel Mikra. Rashi's inyan is not to tell us gematrias or a mozim. Why does Rashi do it? Obviously, Rashi is doing it, the Rebbe says, because the Pasuk uses the expression bezois, which is an unusual expression in such type of a case. The Pasuk should have said, or a simple, another type of an expression. The Pasuk says bezois, so it's a Remes. The Rebbe says really the word bezois is extra, and any other word is extra. The Pasuk should have started, Yova Yaran ala Kodesh. How should Aaron come to the Kodesh? B'par ben bakal lachatas v'ayin loyla. So the fact that when the Pasuk was originally said, when the Yidden heard this Pasuk from the Rebbeinu Shalom through Moshe Rabbeinu in the Midbar, the word was extra. So what do we say? That right away, when Moshe Rabbeinu told the Yidden this pasuk, he right away told them, you should know that there's going to be a first Beis HaMikdash, and the first Beis HaMikdash is going to last for 410 years, and remember that. When the Yidden are in the Midbar, and they're being told all this, they were told, Hashem Yimlech Leilam Vod. They were told about going into Eretz Yisrael. And they were told that Ilu Zachu, they're going to be worth it. Their entry to Eretz Yisrael will be a permanent one and an eternal one. They'll remain constant for life, eternally in Eretz Yisrael. So all of a sudden, Moshe Rabbeinu is reminding them, you should know, you will have a first Beis HaMikdash. And how long is the first Beis HaMikdash going to stand? For 410 years. Very strange. So the Rebbe is explaining, the Yidden in the Midbar have already sinned. They went through the entire experience with the Chet HaEgel. And the Yidden knew that the Rebbeinu Shalom was ready to destroy them all. And it was Moshe Rabbeinu who intervened and began begging by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, Salachti kidvarecha, I have forgiven them like you have suggested. So it's Moshe Rabbeinu that aroused by HaKadosh Baruch Hu a forgiveness. Otherwise, Chas v'Shalom, the Rebbe was ready to destroy all of Klal Yisrael, not bring nobody into Eretz Yisrael. So the Yidden are familiar with such type of an experience that if Chas v'Shalom they will sin, it could lead to consequences. Like we say in davening, why did we go to Golas? Mipnei chatoeinu golino me'artzeinu. So the Rebbe is learning very simple. That is why the Yidden were told right away, you should know there will be a first Beis HaMikdash. First Beis HaMikdash is going to stay for 410 years. And see to it that there shouldn't be an union of chatoyim, there shouldn't be an union of sins, and therefore it would lead to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, the Yidden and the Midbar were right away warned and cautioned that they should act properly so that it shouldn't come to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Furthermore, the Rebbe is learning a step further. The fact that the Beis HaMikdash had to be destroyed after 410 years, the first Beis HaMikdash, this in itself, the Rebbe says, does not an any of consequences yet. Why? Because could be the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash would happen, but it's not necessarily that the Yidden have to follow with a gullus and with problems. Could be this will be a step to a yet higher revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a revelation of the Shekhinah. In other words, would the Yidden act accordingly? So they'll go into Eretz Yisrael, and they'll act properly, and they'll have the Beis HaMikdash, and have it only for 410 years. But it doesn't mean that after the 410 years, problems of Golas will have to begin. Could be that later the Beis HaMikdash would come with yet higher Giluyim, with yet higher revelation of Kedusha. So that is why the Yidden were told right at the beginning, you should know that there's a Beis HaMikdash which is planned for 410 years. And it's up to you, it's in your hands to see to it that things should run smoothly, and then you'll be able to go to yet higher madrigas. Another inyan in this week's Sedre, which the Rebbe raised a question, is where the pasuk says that we are not allowed to eat blood. And then the pasuk uses the expression "v'nasati ponai." It's a cute somewhere. Yeah. V'ishish kapitel Yud Zayin pasuk Yud. It's after Chamishi. V'ishish mebeis Yisrael menager agor b'soichem asher yochel kol dam. If anybody would eat any blood, v'nasati ponai, Hashem says, v'nasati ponai ba'nefesh ha'recheles es adam. If you look into Rashi on v'nasati ponai, Rashi quotes both words, v'nasati ponai, and Rashi says ponai means pnai. Doesn't mean face. Usually panai means a face. Rashi's learning here different. What does panai mean? Pnai, time. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says he will take all his time and put it into this person who ate blood. Painani mikol hasakai. I will cease doing whatever I'm doing. I will turn from all my other businesses. V'isik boy, and concentrate myself on this person. Rebbe is asking, first of all, why is there such a severe punishment for eating blood? After all, it's only a lav. There are other averes where there's kores and misre, and still we don't find such a perush. Dafke here, we find v'nasati panai, pnai sheli HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to stop doing whatever else he's doing, and he's going to get involved with this person who was sinned by eating the blood. Furthermore, Rebbe is asking, we are usually, how do we teach panai, as we just mentioned, means my faith? Why can't it mean v'nasati panai, the Rebbe will turn his face to this person? Just like we know there's an union of Nesius Panim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu turning his face to the good. So here it's in the contrary way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will turn his face to this person, meaning he will bestow upon him a punishment. So we see Rashi staying away from this pshat. Something is forcing Rashi to learn that Panai cannot mean face, but Panai means Pnai, time. So that is learning. Rashi is quoting two words, v'nasati panai. I will give panai. If the pasuk would be referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's face, then the lashon of giving is not befitting. But what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu mean? He will give his face. He will turn his face. No need of giving a face. In fact, that is why Rashi has to quote the word v'nasati, because it's because of the v'nasati that he's forced to learn that panai does not mean face, but panai means time. Pnai. Why packet? Why is this person sinned so severely that the Rebbe is expressing himself in asati panai painani mekol hasoke v'isuk bay? Very simple. Because the pasuk says the reason. V'ishish mebeis Yisrael sheyechol kol dam. As the pasuk goes on, ki nefesh habasar badamhu. The soul, the life, is in the dam, in the blood. And this is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu resents one who eats blood, because blood stands for the Inyan of HaNefesh HaBasar B'Damhu. And let us go back right to the beginning of the creation. Initially, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, what did he permit Adam HaRishon to eat? He permitted him to eat just vegetables. Excuse me. Later, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu realized that fruits and vegetables are not sufficient, that is when he permitted him to be able to eat also animals, behemoths. However, at the same time, he got the warning that an Eiver min Achai we're prohibited to eat. We're not allowed to rip off a piece of flesh from a behemoth and eat. And at the same time, we were also told that we are not allowed to eat blood. Why? For this reason. Ki hadam hu hanefesh. Dam, blood, stands for the soul, represents the soul, the life. And this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has not permitted us to eat. And that is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so outspoken against one who does eat blood, and goes as far as the expression, ki hanefesh habasar b'damhi. And that is why if one does eat blood, he says, v'nosati panai pnai shali. His time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is poinem mekol hasokai v'oisek boy, with this individual who has transgressed and did this sin and went ahead and ate blood. A third Rashi in this week's Sedre is where we find in the Sedre how we are warned not to follow the footsteps of the Mitzrim. That is the beginning of Kapitel Yudches. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe leim medabel b'nei Yisrael v'amarta leim and tell them ani Hashem Elokeichem. Then the pasuk goes on, K'maisei Eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshaftem bo, like the acts of the people of Mitzrayim lo yisasu, thou shalt not do. Also, K'maisei Eretz Canaan, don't do like the people in Canaan, Shani mevi eschem shama, that I'm bringing you there lo yisasu, you should not do like they do. V'chukiseyam lo yisaleichu, and don't go in their ways. Then the pasuk continues, as mishpatai tasu, listen to my commandments and to my mitzvahs, ani Hashem Elokeichem. So what do we have? We have an opening sentence here of the Rabbeinu Shalom, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta leim ani Hashem Elokeichem. Then we have a concluding sentence that we are to fulfill the mitzvahs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the middle, there's a thought that we should not follow the footsteps of the Mitzrim or the Knani. If we look into Rashi, K'maisei Eretz Mitzrayim, Magid comes to tell us, Shemaseim shel Mitzrim v'shel Knainim, the acts of the Mitzrim and the Knainim are mikulkola mikola umis, are spoiled more than all other nations. V'oisa mokem sheyoshu b'Yisrael mikulkol min hakol, and that area where the Yidden were was the worst area. So in other words, the Rebbe is explaining as follows. People have a nature, people have a tendency that the environment around them affects them. Memela, being that the Yidden were for such a long time with the Mitzrim, so the Rebbe is giving us a special warning. You should know, in order that you should be able to fulfill my mitzvahs, don't have any of the acts of the Mitzrim getting close to you, becoming part of you. Also, being that you're now entering Canaan, and again you're going to come into contact with the Canaanites, you should know they are also terrible people. And therefore, being that you're going to come into dealing with them, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is cautioning us not to have any shaychus. The Rebbe says there was no need to caution here the Yidden about Goyim on the other end of the world. How bad they are. Why? Because if the Yid is not in contact with them, it wouldn't have any impact on him. Then we have another Rashi. Asher ani mevi eschem shama. Magid comes to tell us she'oisan amamin she'kovshu Yisrael, that these nations which the Yidden have captured, mikol kolam yosem mikulam, are spoiled more than everyone. Didn't Rashi just say this a line ago? We just learned it in the first Rashi and the pasuk again. So the Rebbe says he would suggest that this second Rashi is really one Rashi with the first. And it's, the expression goes, the Bachar Hazetza, the one who was the typesetter of the Chamashim. It is his error that he took the words of the pasuk. See, he saw the words of Ashani Mevi Eschem Shama in the Rashi, and he saw that these are words in the pasuk. So he put them into italics and made it for a Dibbar HaMaschal, made it for a separate Rashi. But really, this is all one pshat. Rashi is telling us that this idea that these were the worst goyim, and in Mela, be careful, don't have no shaykhs to the Mitzrim, and don't have no shaykhs to the Knanim, because the areas where the Yidden were in the past, which is Mitzrayim, as well as the area which the Yidden are coming into now, which is Knan, you should know that these goyim there have terrible, terrible habits and terrible, terrible customs. Make sure that these things don't become part of you. But really, it is not two separate Rashis, it is all one Rashi. Regarding Pirkei Avos, we begin with the introduction of Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Chelek L'Olam Haba. The Rebbe says when we're talking here about Olam Haba, about the world to come, where we're promised how every Yid has a shaykhus to it, we are talking about Tchiyas HaMesim. Again, Tchiyas HaMesim. Then we begin with Moshe Kibel Torah. And then we have many quotations in the Mishnah. And again, all the quotations are things that go in pairs of three. So here it's spelled out that there are three. Even where it's not spelled out, if you look through the Mishnah, you will see that many of the hayrois, many of the advices which they are giving us, and famous reason why do we learn Pirkei Avos now, because this is coming as a preparation to Matan Torah. So in order to prepare ourselves properly to Matan Torah, we have to prepare our midos, our ethics, and that is why we learn Pirkei Avos from now till Shavuos, every Shabbos. So the Rebbe is again bringing out the fact how everything here is in the number of three. And Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, excuse me, Moshe, let us remember, is not only Goyel Rishon, but it is brought that Moshe is the Goyel Rishon, he was the first one to redeem us. He will also be Goyel Achoi, who will take us out of Golus, the last and final Golus. So we have Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Chelek L'Olam Haba. This is how we're talking about every Yid, how he stands as a Yid. Every Yid as a Yid has a shaykhus to L'Olam Haba. Every Yid will rise in Tchiyas HaMesim. Then we're talking another Madrege, Moshe's Inyan is Torah. This is how every Yid has a shaykhus to Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu. Then we're talking the third Inyan. These advices in groups of three, all these of advices are as far as the area of mitzvahs. So we have here a combination. We have Torah, mitzvahs, and Yidden as they stand mitzad atzmo, mitzad themselves. Pirkei Avos, the Rebbe spoke very briefly. Now let us go to the Rambam.
2 minutes.
Here in Rambam, for those that learn 3 prokim, it is in the halachas of Sukkah. Question the Rebbe is the beginning of Perek Hey in Hilchas Sukkah. Perek Hey, the Rambam begins, Haschach shel Sukkah einei kosher mekol dover. Schach is not kosher from everything, but there are rules and regulations what is good for schach and what is not good for schach. This is in the Rambam, every word is extremely accurate. And the Rambam's inyan is to teach us halachas. And as the Rebbe is learning now, the Rambam wouldn't even quote Gemaras or Mishnahs unless we can derive a halacha from it. So what is the halacha? Haschach shel Sukkah einei kosher mekol dover. The Rambam could have done away with this line and begin telling us, what is kosher for schach? Only something that grows. Why does the Rambam have to give such an introduction? So the Rebbe is learning that this Perik in the Rambam comes in continuation to the previous Perik in the Rambam, Perik Dalet. And when we look inside, we will see, in Perik Dalet it is discussed the walls of a sukkah. And when the Rambam discusses the Tfanei HaSukkah, the walls of the sukkah, the Rambam tells us, Tfanei Sukkah, the walls of a sukkah, Ksheire min Hakol. We can use any type of fiber, anything could be used, any type of material for the wall of a sukkah. Sheinu netzrichen ela mechitza. Actually, what we need is a wall. So the Rambam goes ahead, this could be even a balachayim. You could take a group of animals, if you could make a wall from animals, it's also a kosher sukkah. That's what the Rambam says. So if the Rambam is giving us a halacha that we are so liberal when it comes to the laws of the families of the walls, so the Rambam says, but remember, it comes to schach, it is not so. Schach shel sukkah, eine kosher mikol dover. Even though we just learned the halacha that the fanei has-sukkah, the walls of sukkah, are kosh ksherin min hakoil, so you should know, it comes to schach, it is not so. Ein mesachichin, ella, we can only use the following things, and the following, there's a criteria what is good for schach and what is not good for schach. That is one halacha in the Rambam. Then the Rebbe has brought another halacha in the Rambam, where the Rambam tells us, ha'oises sukosoi tachasa ilon ki'ilu osa b'toich habayis. It's in the same perik, halacha yud beis. Perik hey, halacha yud beis. If one makes a sukkah under a tree, it's as he has made the sukkah in the house. Why does the Rambam have to get into comparisons? Let the Rambam say, you're not allowed to make a sukkah under a tree. The Gemara says it. If we want to know why the Gemara uses this expression, we can cook nach. There, the Gemara derives from psukim. The Gemara learns up from the pasuk why we're not allowed to make a sukkah in the house, why we're not allowed to make a sukkah under a tree, and it's similar psukim. So that is why the Gemara combines it. But the Rambam is not bound with halachas from Gemara. The Rambam's inyan is halachas, to teach us precise halachas in the most simple wording, phrasing possible. Why does the Rambam have to get involved? Explaining is as if he'd made it under a house. In the house. The Rebbe is explaining that the Rambam stresses his point and brings strength to his point. Why? Why do we make sukkahs? Sukkahs commemorate Kibasukos Hashaftis B'nai Yisrael. That the Rebishter, when he took us out of Mitzrayim, has protected us in sukkahs and tents. We know that this is something which we have to keep in mind when we sit in sukkah. Like the Rebbe in the Pesach letter quotes the halacha in Shulchan Aruch, it's negeya. We must have, though all over by mitzvahs, our kavanah, our intent is not important. Here there is a special siman in Shulchan Aruch that when we enter the sukkah, we go into sukkahs. This is what we have to make sure to keep in mind, that we know we are sitting in sukkah for this reason. Ki basukos hashaftis b'nei Yisrael b'tziyos emerch Mitzrayim. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom has taken us out of Mitzrayim and protected us in sukkahs. So the stress is a sukkah. It has to be a sukkah and not a house. In other words, the house is contrary to the sukkah. What is something which shows us a complete opposite to sukkah? Bias. So the Rambam is stressing, when one makes a sukkah under an ilan, under a tree, you should know it's ki'ilu asa b'tayich habayis. It has no shaychus to sukkahs whatsoever, and in no way is he fulfilling the mitzvah, commemorating the inyan of Kibasukos Yeshaftis B'nai Yisrael. You should know it just like you have made it in the house. Ki'ilu asa b'tayich habayis. In other words, the ki'ilu asa b'tayich habayis is not just the Rambam is using a comparison type of language or beautifying his Hebrew. It's strengthening more why taka it's no good a sukkah under an ilan, under a tree. Why is a sukkah under a tree no good? Because it's just like in a house. Just like in the house you understand that the house is the contrary of the sukkah. So you should know that if you make your sukkah under a tree, it's the same value, just like you've made it in the house. Then there's a third Rambam. Third Rambam the Rebbe spoke about actually a few weeks ago. He spoke about it today again. Third Rambam deals, we know on Shabbos we are supposed to rest, as well as Avdecha, V'amosecha. Our slaves are also supposed to rest on Shabbos. So in Hilchos Shabbos, when the Rambam explains these dinim, he tells us which type of Eved, which type of slave of ours is obligated to rest on Shabbos. Only the one who has accepted mitzvahs. However, the one who has not accepted mitzvahs, even though he's observing the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, he's considered like a ger toishav, the Rambam tells us, and he's not obligated to fulfill Shabbos. And the Rambam uses an expression, he's allowed to do melacha b'frahesye, in public, ki Yisrael b'choil, just like a Yid in the Vach. During the week, in the week time. Again, if the Rambam wants to say that he's allowed to do malacha, fine, enough. Why does the Rambam have to add on he's allowed to do malacha publicly, like a yid during the week? Truth is, in Gemara, in that sugya, this expression is used. The Gemara, there are various opinions. One says like a yid in Yontef. One says like a yid during the week, because the Yontef yid is allowed to do things which he's not allowed to do on Shabbos. But as far as halach is concerned, why does the Rambam have to quote these words altogether? Once the Rambam has told us that he's allowed to do malacha, b'frahesye, mutar, lasis, malacha, this is self-explanatory that it is like a yid during the week, or there's no need to compare even. Talking about this inyan, the Rebbe raised another question. We know there is a concept of gzeiras. The Chachamim have made various type of gzeiras. One of the approaches we find in gzeiras Chachamim is, we don't let you do something now, so that next year Mashiach will come. Right, next year we'll have Mashiach, and we will say, Ashtaked, last year we did certain things. Gemara discusses it about Tzvira Soime. There's a certain Indian which is quoted in Gemara by the Korban Mavaima. Ashtaked, last year we have done so and so. So Mamela this year we will also do that. So the Chachamim are afraid of that, and the Chachamim have set rules, put down certain gzeires that it should not lead to that next year we will say, being that a year ago it was permitted to do, let us do it now again. So the Chachamim have outruled it completely. So the Rebbe is asking, we're talking about a person who's a knecht, who's a slave by a Jew. He's observing the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, which means he's acting accordingly, and he's hanging around a Yiddish house. This person is a potential Geir. Be careful with this person. Maybe let us put upon him certain restrictions. Why? He'll come next year, he'll say, next year, I mean in time from now, we'll say, when I was by the Yid, I did these and these things. Maybe I'm allowed to do it now too. Why isn't there such type of a gezeirah? The Rebbe is asking. And the Rebbe answers that all the gezeiras of Chachamim are for Yidden. The Chachamim will not go ahead and make a gezeirah for a goy. Perhaps he will become a geyer, even he's hanging around a Yid's house and he's close to Yidden and he's working for the Yidden. There's a good chance that this individual may become a geyer, may convert. But still, nonetheless, the Chachamim did not do that. The Rebbe says, even in a geyer children, there's a shakla v'tarye, there's discussion in Svarim, if the Chachamim have put certain gezeiras on children, on Yiddish children, to prohibit them from certain doings, because perhaps when they will grow up, they will say, being that we were young, we were allowed to do it. Perhaps now, if the bar mitzvah, we were also allowed to do it. So this is something the Rebbe says which is discussed in Svarim. But as far as a goy, to go ahead and say that a goy isn't allowed to do certain things, just because maybe he will convert, and chances are that this particular guy may take convert because of his individual situation. Still, the Chachamim have not made any gezeiros. And again, the Rebbe concluded that the Rambam will, at times, use expressions from Gemara or expressions from Mishnah, even though it is not exactly needed for the halacha, being that this is an expression which is used in the particular sugya where this psak of the Rambam originates from. The Rambam will quote certain type of expressions and use them when he paskins his halachas. The Rebbe concluded again that we are waiting for the coming of Mashiach, and we're waiting together with it will be Tchias HaMesim as well. And he concluded with the words that the Rambam concludes. The Rambam concludes his sefer, U'mala ha'aretz deyas Hashem kamayim layom mechasim. The time will come when the world will become full of wisdom and knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like the waters are filled with the Yamim, the oceans are filled with water. The Rebbe also added on that it's interesting that the last Maimah in the Likutei Torah, and the Likutei Torah is a sefer which is Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, which was edited by whom? By the Tzemach Tzedek, is also a Maimah which begins with the pasuk, on the pasuk of Umola Haaretz Deis Hashem Kamayim Layom Mechasim. A gute Woche.